like to thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we gathered a couple months ago about the robocall scandal, the voter suppression, and some of the threats to our democracy that we're seeing. I want to thank you all for coming out. I think Armed Forces Day is a good day to celebrate our democracy because the point of Armed Forces is to defend our democracy, and it's and to promote that abroad as well. So I think standing and assembling and speaking your mind and standing up for Canada honors the men and women of our armed forces. In February of this year, two Ottawa Citizen reporters broke the scandal, what became known as the robocall scandal, in which calls were made to voters in what have been identified as over 100 ridings to identify non-conservative voters, followed up by calls around Election Day misdirecting voters to non-existing polling stations. And this was also coupled with harassing phone calls alleged to be primarily from the Liberal Party, but also the NDP, that were meant to anger voters and stop them from turning out. And that happened, that story broke over 4 months ago. And 3 months ago, we gathered with other Canadians from across the country, in every province and territory, to demand an independent judicial inquiry and by-elections in any riding where those results were in doubt. And we're still waiting. You know, rather than the Prime Minister acknowledge that there may have been wrongdoing and wanting to get to the bottom of this and being transparent about it and trying to restore integrity in the system, he has actively obstructed any attempt to do so. Since that initial scandal broke, what we've learned is that voter suppression calls were made in about 100 ridings. Tactics such as registering voters that weren't ineligible voters were used in ridings, specifically in Etobicoke. We know that the Conservatives in the riding of Deputy Defence Minister Julian Fantino had a separate slush fund which they were potentially using to pay for some of these robocall activities. An ECO survey, which was one of the major opinion polls, polling company in Canada, that was done in mid-April, showed that in the ridings that were targeted by the robocall scandal, which are numbering now over 100, as many as 1.5% of eligible voters may have stayed home because of this misleading phone calls. And the entire Conservative majority depends on about 6,200 votes in 14 ridings. And actually they needed to win about, I think, 13 of those ridings to actually maintain their majority in the House of Commons. So 6,200 people decided that Harper got a majority government instead of a minority government with a strong NDP opposition. Now, there's something wrong with our system if 2% of 1% of our nation's population can decide our form of government. So there's something wrong there that needs to be fixed. But we now know from these polls and other studies that the voter suppression techniques used, and this actually didn't include the accounting for the harassing phone calls that were made, which may have lowered voter turnout further or may have changed people's votes. But we know that based on that data, that enough people may have stayed home to affect the outcome in those 14 ridings. So the entire legitimacy of the Harper majority is in doubt. Government is in doubt. And rather than being conciliatory, rather than trying to work with the other parties, Stephen Harper has used his majority to ram through a radical agenda down Canadians' throats. he's supporting a private member's bill that will see mass protesters jailed for up to 10 years. He's pursuing radical copyright reform that will criminalize activities of many Canadians. He's pursuing basically warrantless wiretapping on internet service providers. And he's pursuing an omnibus, basically, piece of legislation that's labeled the budget in Bill C-38 that rewrites environmental rules, that allows for U.S. federal agents to operate within our borders, that rewrites labor laws, and it's being rammed down our throat with almost no debate and no chance for Canadians to discuss it. Right. So rather than a Prime Minister doing his duty as a Prime Minister and trying to uphold the integrity of the electoral process, we have somebody who's trying to take advantage of the situation to pursue a very radical agenda. And I don't necessarily think that the Prime Minister knew everything that was going on with this robocall scandal. And you're not guilty of a crime if your neighbor, does a crime, but if you help him cover it up after the fact, then you're an accessory to that crime. And the Prime Minister... knows that crimes were committed, and he has done everything he can to obstruct any investigations into it. They are pursuing, they're trying to throw out a judge's order to have a by-election called in Etobicoke, where the issue was primarily voter registration. He's also trying to throw out a court challenge from the Council of Canadians that's seeking to have election results in another 7 ridings overturned. And if any of you have any money that you can donate to this cause, Council of Canadians does have a legal challenge, and it's a good cause to donate. The lawyers are working for basically nothing or pro bono, but if there's any way that you can support this financially, I'd encourage you to do so. It's the Council for Canadians. But rather than Stephen Harper acting like a Prime Minister, he is trying to obstruct the process, and we're here today to let him know we haven't forgotten about the robocall scandal. We think that he stole a majority government, and we're going to stand here today on Armed Forces Day and tell him it's not okay, and tell him we're not going to go away until we get what we want, which is an independent judicial inquiry and by-elections in all ridings where this could conceivably have made the difference in the outcome. Thank you.